Hey there. We are back for your midweek boost, the last one in September. Maren and Simon with another encouraging time based on this book, Passionate Marriage, and wrapping this up for encouragement to go the long haul through a committed, monogamous, long term relationship.
And again, this is the book is really about intimacy and how we think about intimacy, both emotionally and how it connects to how we're intimate physically as well. So today we're going to be talking about how we really make it on the long haul, because this is not always easy. I can tell you personally, we've definitely had our ups and downs and some really big challenges that have faced us. And so we're excited to kind of share what we've learned and some of the thoughts from the book.
Mm-hmm. So the first main idea that we're going to talk about today is when we feel stuck or when we're in our relationship and it feels so frustrating and we just desperately want things to change. And often we can say to ourselves or say to other people, like, I don't have a choice. I don't have any options. And what this author says is that's actually not true. You don't have an option that you want. And that is a very important distinguishing difference. So I'm going to read you a little paragraph about that. We have the fantasy that we have the choice between being anxious and not being anxious. Unfortunately, that's not the choice we have. Our choice is between one anxiety or another anxiety. Do something scary or face problems from not doing it. Make an error by commission or omission. Face the anxiety that things will change or stay the same. Do things, sexual things even, you've never done, or forfeit that taste of life. Face the anxiety of growing up or the error of facing life as a perpetual child. Confront the fear of differentiation or the dread of marital living death. Ouch.
Ouch. Yeah.
So what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about the paragraph, especially with the history we have, is what he's really describing are choices that are difficult. These are not easy choices.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to sit here saying, hey, you've got a choice, just choose one and no big deal. It is really, really hard.
Yeah.
And these are the kinds of choices sometimes in the small things, but also in the large things, right? So if maybe, there's been infidelity, or maybe there's drug or alcohol use, or whatever it might be, these are the kind of difficult choices that we get faced with. And so the question that this kind of raises then is, how do we move forward from there? When we know that we've got these difficult choices, and it's not like I can calm my anxiety with these of the choices, which is what we ultimately really want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It makes me think of even just stopping, pausing, being curious about what actually are my options, especially when we feel like we don't have a choice or we're stuck, to open up that door, expand and go, well, what are all the options I could think of? Even
right.
If you don't want to do that option, even if you would never do that option, it's empowering to recognize I do have choices and I can do hard things.
One of the other challenges in being able to open that up to have those other options is we need to be radically honest with ourselves. We have to be willing to really talk through what maybe our desires are, what our anxieties are, what are we afraid of. And, we're not really comfortable with that. That's a level of vulnerability that's really high. And we're afraid of what the other person might think or say or respond to when we are in that place of vulnerability. And so part of the first step is really being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And really asking yourself, what am I afraid of? What is causing anxiety? What about this situation, whether it's this choice, that choice, or another choice, what parts of that are actually feel maybe even dangerous to you, where you don't feel safe? And so being really honest with yourself about those things can be really helpful in moving forward as well.
Well, and one thing that you're bringing up, which we're huge fans of, is asking good questions, like turning the judgment or criticism, negativity into curiosity and asking good questions. And I love those that you just proposed. I mean, those are super practical and it takes some courage.
It does. It takes a lot of courage. And what we're encouraging you today is not to look at this as I can't get through it, but really as an opportunity to say, what can I learn? What are the opportunities for me to learn about myself, about my partner, about the situation, and how can I really become to get to that place of curiosity? What are some of those good questions that we need to consider?
You know, this is circling back to the beginning, but this is how the author wraps up this book as well, is saying that bugs me. What are my choices? Is saying that marriage is difficult. We are going to bump into things that cause us anxiety, that feel uncomfortable, that produce a lot of emotion. And yet, these are the growth factors in a marriage.
Right.
And to have the most vibrant, intimate, exciting long-term relationship with someone, the mechanism is to go through the difficult things, to go through that crucible, because that's what growth happens.
And I think that's sometimes very difficult to accept.
Yeah.
Because what we want is to have a marriage that is easy, fun, intimate, right? Both sexually, emotionally, and we want that to all kind of be an easy process. And the reality is, guess what? We're really individuals. And we have really different perspectives.
Yeah.
We have really different backgrounds. We have really different ideas, judgments, biases, and all of those come into our relationship. And even if you're trying really hard not to have them come in, I guarantee it, like coming into the relationship.
Trying hard doesn't prevent it.
Right, that's right.
And we used to try really hard.
Yeah.
And I don't think that saved us any headaches at all, actually.
No, I think it actually caused more headache.
More.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, this section also reminds me of something you might have heard us say before, is this normal pattern in relationships and situations. And it's true with our relationship with ourselves, but also with other people. And it's this pattern of order, disorder, and reorder. And that basically means that there are times where we're going to feel comfortable. We're going to be like, yes, I'm in the flow. I have things figured out. And then the next stage of that pattern is, wow, what happened? This isn't what I thought at all. This feels really uncomfortable. Everything feels out of control. That's the disorder stage. And then that eventually will move into reorder. Our brains process, our brains reorganize, and we start to move into a different way of being in the reorder stage. And I know for us, I mean, those disorder times were just so hard. Troubling, so really difficult. Hard. And yet now, if there's a week where we're not really clicking, or we're not really getting along, in my mind, I go, oh, we're just in the disorder stage.
Right.
Next week is going to be different. It's going to be okay, because eventually we're going to move into reorder.
And I will say this, I think with each of those cycles, we are learning. And because we're learning, the character of the order, disorder, reorder is also very different. I can tell you how disorder used to be very, very difficult.
Horrible.
And used to last a long time. And now it's not comfortable, but it isn't as damaging maybe to our relationship.
Say that word, yeah,
to our relationship as I think it has been in the past, and that's because of the learning process of going through the cycle. So again, it's not that we can eliminate it 100%. It's to say now we can approach it differently. And I think part of it is if we can have an openness, we can be honest, we can try and be curious, we can gain new perspectives. That's where you can use that disorder time to then reorder into a new place.
Yeah, there's some hope there.
There is a lot of hope there.
Well, there's one more thing I want to read about this problem, the two-choice dilemma, just to give you, see if it resonates with you. He says, our problem is not the two-choice dilemma itself, but our refusal to face it. And you brought that up earlier, like facing reality. facing what's going on inside of us. Our willingness to meet life on its own terms. Difficulty with two choice dilemmas commonly takes several forms. And this is the part I just wanted to put out there for you to see. We can't remain calm in the face of our partner's agenda. We are so reactive and poorly defined that we can't change our position even when it's in our best interest. We refuse to see our partner as a separate person, or we are unwilling to tolerate the anxiety of personal growth. Ouch. I mean, all those are kind of ouch, but really that last one really hits me.
And I can tell you, we've experienced all of this. I mean, really, these are all areas that I think we've had to really understand, learn, and grow from. I think, I mean, I could give you an example of every single one of those because I mean, each of those have really impacted us. And by learning how to face these questions and approach them differently and learn from them, we are able to actually call it out, frankly, to say, hey, I have some anxiety about this, or I am concerned about, I am being reactive and I need to take a step back. So again, that it sort of combines itself with the self-awareness that we grow as we go through these cycles.
It's also reminding me of another concept we've talked about is in terms of avoidance of, are we turning away? Are we turning away from ourselves, our partner, the opportunity for growth, the reality of what's going on, our fears, like turning away? Or the invitation here is, can we turn toward what's going on inside of us, toward our partner, toward facing, boy, this is hard and it's a growth opportunity. Because if we're turning away, we're going to be in one of those four categories.
It's interesting, depending on where you're at in your relationship, you may be facing some really challenging things. I wouldn't be, I'm sure there's somebody in our audience who is really being faced with some challenges. So we want to bring this forward as a way to start moving forward. It's not going to solve all the problems overnight, for sure, right? But it is going to be a path, and that path can really lead to your own sense of self, to trust yourself, to be resilient, but also to have the courage to approach a partner maybe in a different way.
And I'll just throw in a plug here. We are formulating a healthy relationship path. So if you are interested in working on that for yourself, or you and a partner, or you and a family member, reach out to us. We're really excited to put this in an actual pathway and cover some of the practical tools that can be used, practiced when we decide we're going to turn toward this two-choice dilemma and face it head on.
I will just add as a comment as well that these two-part dilemmas that we face are not just in intimate relationships. They actually face this in lots of different relationships, whether we're at work, whether it's with friends, whether it's family. It can happen in lots and lots of settings. So these tools that we're talking about, even though we want that to be a source of intimacy, it also can be helpful in a lot of different arenas as well. And so we want you to think about that. So again, our journey called the Transformational Relationship Journey is available to you. It will give some very, very practical skills to help you move into that kind of transformational relationship that, frankly, most of us are looking for.
And if you reach out and are interested, we'll set up a free call with you to talk it through, to share what's involved and what you're going to experience on the other side of it. So basically, we wanted to talk about, we've already given you a lot of tools, but two main things when you're willing to face that anxiety, the reality. And the first one is holding on to yourself. And then really part two of that is self-soothing, taking care of yourself. So those are kind of a combo thing. But the author really highlights the importance. He said, if you take anything away from this book, take the fact that if you're in the struggle, hold on to yourself.
And what do you think when I mean, we've talked about this, right? What do you think that really means in sort of the heat of the moment?
Oh,
Right, that's hard.
That is a great question, and it's really hard. I think for me, it's literally in the moment, like noticing what's going on, and grounding myself, maybe around a few deep breaths, um, giving myself some encouragement in the moment, even taking a pause and stepping away. It's inviting self kindness. It's really a lot of self awareness in the moment of struggle.
Mm-hmm. And I know for me, what I had to change in some of my thinking around it was, if I'm going to hold on to myself, it's actually the opposite of saying I'm right. It's actually more around, can I hold on to myself and know that I have a perspective and I have some things that I've experienced, and be curious about the other perspective and the other person's point of view. And so think about this in terms of intimacy, right? We think about this in terms of physical intimacy. One partner may have a very different picture of what sexual intimacy looks like versus the other. And so the question isn't whether one's right or one's wrong. The question is, how do we have some conversation and curiosity about it that allows for both people to be able to enter into that space together?
Mm-hmm. I really like that. And it makes me think of keeping relational space here, because holding on to myself is, I'm not like totally throwing myself in the middle or trying to cling on to you or pull on you. It's, I'm taking care of myself and I'm leaving that space. I love how you said that, to hear the other person's perspective as well. Yeah. Well, the author gives an analogy. So I wanted to read that paragraph to you. This is how he describes it. Going through gridlock in your marriage is much like climbing a mountain. If you feel in control of yourself, rather than trying to control the terrain or weather, you can relax and enjoy the climb. When you're tense and feeling out of control, the climb seems far more difficult. It helps if you keep in mind that you really never master the mountain. You master yourself in the process of climbing the mountain. The mountain remains the same. It is you who changes. And remember, you have to climb several mountains before you feel confident of yourself. But you can't wait until you feel safe and secure before you venture out for your first climb. Isn't that a good analogy?
That's a great analogy. Yeah. Yeah. So again, just to pull it all together, what we're asking you to step into is recognize that there is a normal anxiety, and that anxiety is part of this reorder process, or what we call reconnection as well. And in that process, the questions that you want to ask is, how am I going to hold on to myself? How am I going to step into a place of curiosity? And how am I going to, what energy am I going to put in the space between us?
Love it. This is his idea, the author's idea of holding on to yourself. And he also ties this back into differentiation, which was what we talked about the whole first session, and woven through the other sessions as well. Maintaining a clear sense of who you are, maintaining a clear sense of who I am.
Outside of even the relationship, right? Yeah. It's being, who am I as an individual?
Maintaining a sense of perspective about our anxieties. We were talking about perspective taking. That's a really good one too. The willingness to engage in self-confrontation. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
One of the things that we do in our relationship is, when we notice the anxiety in the other person, we'll say, hey, what are you noticing right now? And so we're trying to sort of prompt our partner to really say, hey, what's going on internally for you? I don't have to have any judgment. I don't have to have any answers. I'm just asking that question, because oftentimes either one of us won't necessarily recognize the anxiety. It'll come out in our actions, but not necessarily recognizing it. And that little prompt can just really be helpful.
I mean, this is huge in terms of trust as well. When we didn't feel safe in our relationship and we didn't really trust the safety of our relationship, I would often, my anxiety would go up, and my response would be, I'd often turn to Simon and be like, you're doing this, this is going on with you. Right. And I'd be analyzing and putting all my stories on him. And we've really been able to switch that through the differentiation process by now going, hey, I'm picking up something, I'm sensing something inside, so I'm honoring that. But then it's all up to Simon to check in with himself. So if as a couple, you can come to, in a sense, an agreement, a trust level of saying, I'm willing to self-confront, the other person can agree that they can self-confront, that totally increases trust.
One of the things I had to do, because I'm very quick to answer questions without really spending time in it. Some of you might just automatically say, if your partner says, hey, how are you doing? Or what's going on? You might just say, I'm fine. Rather than now, what I've really tried to do is say, I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm willing to take some time to really look at what's going on. And just that alone gives me some time and space. And it doesn't mean there's something wrong. It just means I'm willing to examine it. And there are times I come back and say, I'm really doing well. And there are times I'm saying, yeah, I'm really noticing some things.
Yeah. And that goes both ways. I mean, it's almost like we're becoming more like, I could sense something going on with Simon. He can sense what's going on with me sometimes before we're even aware of it. But in kindness, we're able to point it out, and it can be really, really helpful instead of blaming or shaming or just letting our anxiety get out of control.
Right.
The next one totally ties into what we've already talked about, acknowledging your projections and distortions. So when we get anxious, our projections, things can get confusing and messy. Those can skyrocket as well. It's like direct proportion with anxiety.
Right.
And then the last one is tolerating the pain involved in growing.
It's a tough one. I'll tell you a quick story. When we were struggling and we decided to go to therapy, it was really hard to accept that we were going to go to therapy. And in fact, I told Martin, you can just go by yourself. I'm not going. But I can tell you by confronting myself, being willing to actually look at that, it was an amazing time of growth and insights that grew as a result of that, without necessarily needing to feel like something. I didn't need to shame myself in the process. So a lot today. We covered a lot of different things today.
I want to just touch on some self-control. One of the paragraph headers in here is self-control lets you stop controlling your partner.
Do you need to read that again?
Oh, that's a good one. And I wanted to just highlight some of the pieces of self-control that the author talks about. So confront yourself for the sake of your own integrity and personal development. So we just talked about confronting ourselves or owning that. And here's his reminder. It's for our own growth. It's for our own integrity. It's not to try to change the other person.
It's actually a form of accountability, self-accountability. Like, I'm going to hold myself accountable to who I want to be.
And that builds trust.
For sure.
If you're having difficulty identifying your own issues, look at both sides of your two-choice dilemma.
Yeah. So when you think about that, when you're looking at things and you think both of them are bad, the question to ask is, what is it inside of me that interprets these options as bad or not good or not what I want, right? And so that's really what the author's talking about, is if you don't know what's going on, the dilemma itself can actually reveal some of the issues.
Well, I think that helps us uncover, like, what fear am I avoiding?
That's right.
Or what am I avoiding altogether? Going back to those asking good questions. Stop taking your partner's reaction personally. Boom. That's it. Drop
mic drop. We're good.
Not saying that's easy though.
No, not at all.
Don't count on your partner to confront him or herself in return. So it's unhooking from the outcome. If I'm going to confront myself, I'm doing that out of my own integrity, not to manipulate the other person. Forget about working on your relationship or the idea that the relationship is the problem. That's an interesting one.
Yeah. I think part of that, and part of what I think we've learned is, it's sometimes easy to point to a person within the relationship, and this is why the relationship isn't working because you're doing X, Y, and Z, right? And rather than if I'm really going to be honest about the relationship, it's about me, and I've got to do my work. Mara gets to decide if she wants to do the work or not. I don't get to decide that for her. Now, if I can unhook from trying to say, well, I'll do the work if you do the work, which is, quote, working on your relationship, and I can say, well, I'm going to be the person that I want to be, and that is a person that's going to be accountable. I'm going to self-confront. I'm going to grow in whatever ways I can through this process. Then I'm unhooking from whatever Maren decides to do. I will tell you, at least in our relationship, what we noticed is when one person does that, there is an increase in the tension because one person's growing and the other's not, right? And now so there will be increased tension if one party decides to make that choice and the other doesn't. But again, that's still a choice they get to decide. How much are they wanting to tolerate?
Makes me think of like one of those kids' mobiles above the crib. If one person is growing and changing and switching things up, everything else in that system is going to feel it. And it is pretty common that the other partner or the other people in that system, their first reaction is change back.
Right.
Even if they don't like that,
they'd rather
it's comfortable.
Right. It's rather that, right.
Yeah. So that disorder phase is happening. And if we can tolerate the anxiety of that, we know we're going to move into the reorder. This is a really tough one. Stop focusing on what your partner is or isn't doing. Focus on yourself. I mean, our brains are just wired to look for danger.
Yeah.
And we're just wired to focus on what's out here, but that is not going to be helpful.
And so what does that look like practically, right? I think one of the things that we're trying to do is, here's what I'm noticing about me. I'm noticing I'm feeling anxious right now during this process, right? I'm anxious when these kinds of things, these kinds of reactions are happening. And it was reminding me of something in my past, and that feels uncomfortable to me. So that's a really different way than saying, well, if you'd stop just
whatever,
fill in the blank, right? Because that's what we want to do. There's a part of us that wants to say, it's not me, it's you.
Yeah.
We're trying to move away from that.
And that totally fits with the next one. Stop trying to change your partner. Pressuring your partner actually reduces the pressure on both of you for change. That's interesting. It's counterintuitive.
It is counterintuitive.
For solution, look in different directions from where you've looked in the past. Reconsider options you've previously rejected. So we've kind of talked about that.
One of the things that I want to think about if you're in some of these dilemmas is try and get away from binary thinking, an either or, right? That's only having two options. Almost always there's multiple options. So it's just a matter of opening up that curiosity to say, what are the real other options that are available?
Stop trying to make your partner listen, accept, and validate you. Listen to yourself. That's a good one. Yeah. Keep your mouth shut about your partner's issues, particularly concerning things you're certain are true. Self-control.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about.
Right.
Don't identify with your feelings. The issue isn't whether you're entitled to your feelings. Feelings are valid. Feelings are there. The problem is the feelings we defend usually aren't the ones we want.
Right. So when we justify being angry or we justify whatever it is, that's really what this is talking about.
Pay attention to your tone, what you're putting in that relational space. And once your projections, once you read that one, my eyes are getting blurry.
Own your projections as an act of integrity. So when we recognize that we have distortions or expectations, we need to own them. Hey, this is what I'm really thinking about. I have this expectation or I have this story in my head about this. And I need to own that. I recognize that may not be true. And so, and again, pull that back into the sexual intimacy, right? How many times maybe you feel like, well, I'm really expecting you to do X, Y, and Z. That's really my expectation, but I know that's mine.
Yeah, that's good. Let the best in you do the thinking and talking. It's once again being really aware of what we're putting into the space and trying to show up as your best self. And one more in here is, he said, if you can't control your emotions, control your behavior. I was like, oh, that's a good one, because it's basically, we're practicing what we're putting in. We're practicing living from our integrity instead of just having the reaction.
Self-control and emotion is really, it's such an important skill to learn. We're not saying invalidate your emotion. In fact, we're saying honor your emotion. But now the question is, how much of your emotion is connected to your behavior?
Yeah, and we can choose our behavior even in the midst of feeling anxious,
big
or
emotion.
big emotions.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap up this month of intimacy, sexual intimacy, and using those difficult situations to have growth and live more vibrantly, having a great marriage. And we are living testimonies of that. We continue to work on these things, but we believe in this process. We believe in these things because we so enjoy our relationship now.
And we've lived it. I want you to know that this is coming out of our own lived experience of the difficult things. And we've had some really big, difficult things. So we're not talking about just minor things as well. So we're there with you. We've been in this place, and we want you to know there is hope. If you are in a difficult place, it can be better. And it's not easy, but it can be better.
Yep. So once again, reach out. We love to hear your comments and questions. And if you want to dive deeper into some practical relationship skills, we can set up a discovery call.
Take care.